What's up, guys? Welcome back to Michigan Muckraker. My name is Michelle. Today is January 8th of 2025. And yesterday, Trump came out with an announcement on basically what people are calling the Great American Empire. And so we're going to get into that and how the USMCA trade deal that Trump negotiated in 2018 ties into this because the renegotiation is happening this year into next, and how the Megaregions also tie into this announcement. So I have a ton of information to share with you guys. It's going to be a longer one, but I hope you'll bear with me, and I hope my voice will bear with me as we go through this, because it's extremely important to understand what exactly is happening and why. And Megaregions is a big reason why, which is all about UN Agenda 2030. So let's jump into the info, waste no more time. Implementing sustainability in major sports, the making of a green team. Quick announcement, tomorrow is a webinar on how the Cleveland Cavaliers, I keep forgetting where they're from. Sorry, I'm not huge into sports, but I'm huge into sustainability and the UN Agenda 2030, and so I thought this was interesting to see how they're going to change the nature of sporting events to be more sustainable. So if you're interested, I'll have the link down below. Please check it out. So right off the bat, we're going to check out Benny Johnson, who is an alternative conservative media host. I say alternative because I surely don't believe it. At one point, he might have been, but since he's been captured by the greater American regime. And he is promoting this idea of merging Canada and America, the United States of America, as well as Mexico, although this picture does not show that. Coming down here, I'm old enough to remember when the North American Union was a globalist scheme to turn us into economic zone in the New World Order. The economic zones are megaregions, basically. Now it's America first. What a time to be alive. A 1942 map of the New World Order. The map on the bedroom wall of every teenage Bilderberger. If you don't know, the Bilderberg group is just another centralized group of people who consider themselves the intelligentsia, and they want to try to tell us how to live, and they're trying to shape the whole world, make a plan for the entire world, and Megaregions is that plan. So there will be no nations. This individual, Che Guevara, is the North American Union back on the agenda? When Donald Trump posts a map merging Canada with the United States and calls Canada a 51st state, it's tempting to dismiss it as classic Trump showmanship. But combine that with whispers of his supposed deal for Greenland, Trudeau's resignation, and the eerie reemergence of the Club of Rome's 10 Kingdoms map, and you start to wonder, is the North American Union being dusted off? For those unfamiliar, the North American Union was the fever dream of globalist elites back in 2008, folding the US, Canada, and Mexico into one neat package, complete with a new constitution and currency, the Amero. The idea to dissolve national borders under the guise of free trade and usher in the next chapter of the New World Order. They call it global governance now, and I'm going to show you several examples where they talk about it openly. The New World Order, you should know by now, is not really a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact. It faced massive public backlash, and the globalists quietly shelved it. Or did they? Fast forward to today, and suddenly we're watching the same play unfold with different actors. Greenland, strategically vital and resource-rich, is back on the bargaining table. Not only that, but in some of these documents that I have to share with you, they talk about the Arctic Treaty, and if the ice melts, how many resources are there for the takings, and Greenland is a strategic land for that resource. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words there. Canada is framed as a drain on the U.S. economy, its sovereignty trivialized, all while Arctic resource wars with Russia and China heat up. and Washington angles for dominance over the last untapped frontier. And here's the twist. Trump, a man once heralded as the anti-globalist, could be positioned to deliver on their most audacious plan yet. Audacious. Call it the ultimate psyop. Get conservatives who rightly opposed the NAU when Obama floated it to cheer for it now. Same agenda, different salesman. It's unbelievable. The USMCA that Trump negotiated is NAFTA 2.0 is what they call it. It's everything about NAFTA is the same, except for they added some things. And I'm going to get into those differences. In particular, Trump added an environmental law section, which never was under Clinton. And he's supposed to be the person who understands that the climate change narrative is a Trojan horse in order to bring about global governance. So what's going on? Is Trump captured? Has he always been captured? What do you guys think? For Canadians, the message is clear. Sovereignty is under siege. Trump is just saying the quiet part out loud. The real question is, why isn't Canada looking to the global south and BRICS for inspiration? Sovereign nations finding strength in cooperation, not in servitude, to Washington. Well, unfortunately, BRICS is also a plan that these self-anointed think tanks and NGOs all got together and they created a plan to basically subvert American power, the petrodollar. That's what gives us our power. And BRICS was a way to do that. So you need to have two conflicting forces so that you can bring order out of chaos. For Canadians, the message... Oh, sorry, I already read that. As for Greenland, Trump's bravado about buying it feels less like comedy and more like foreshadowing. The Arctic isn't just about ice, it's about resources, shipping routes, and global dominance. The chessboard is set and the elites are betting you won't see the move until it's too late. This is a great post. The North American Union isn't just a conspiracy theory, but also a reminder that sovereignty is a fragile thing. And the globalists never really let go of their grand designs. Whether it's called NAU, the Amero, or just business, the goal is always the same. Consolidation of power, resources, and nations into the hands of a few. Could not have said it better than this person. So Canada, what's it going to be? Independence or the 51st star on the flag? Your move. But here is the map of the 10 kingdoms. In this 1974 prototype, the Club of Rome has divided the world into 10 regional kingdoms, which will replace all national boundaries when the New World Order is implemented. Now, this is showing that Mexico is not a part of the kingdom, but in the new plans, Mexico is. They do revise them. Here's Cat Turd once again, saying this is fire. So why are all these conservatives who were supposed to be for small government, from my understanding, anti-establishment, which would mean small government, why are they promoting this? Why are they happy with this? Tara Bull says Trump is not playing. Another conservative who is all for Trump and what he's doing. And then this person, just one comment, you idiots. That was Bill Clinton's plan with NAFTA. They wanted North American Union, just like that travesty, the European Union. They even had the Amero all worked out. Wake up. Y'all about to make the same, make me say real bad words. You fools are begging for it. Okay. Derek Braz, highly recommend you follow this individual. He is well aware that the United Nations Agenda 2030 and then the Agenda 2050 plan is the master plan that is the reason why everything that's happening now is happening. It's because that plan is all about inventory and control every resource. So if you have a business, the first thing you do before you can actually start selling your product or whatever, you need to inventory and control your resources. And so that is what these globalists want to do. And it's much easier to do that if you limit freedom of movement, which I'm going to discuss, the congestion zones that are in New York this year, and you and I forgot where I was going because I started thinking about the New York stuff. Sorry. Got too much going on. This stuff really, I fell down this rabbit hole and I still have a long way to go. But this is the stuff that I like researching. These big plans, they just tell you what they're going to do right in their documents. You just have to read them. Andrea Lynn, another individual I highly recommend if you do Twitter, X, which I don't recommend paying for, by the way. It is going to be the WeChat of America, of the North American Union. It's going to be all in one. Everything that you want to do online will go through the X app. That's the ultimate goal. So this is a temporary thing right now. You can get great information, but already AI is flooding this stuff, and eventually dead internet theory, there'll just be AI everywhere. And they did that again to bring in the digital ID, which I'm about to get to as well. I have a lot to go over. If you're wondering why there's talk of bringing in Canada and Greenland, here's your answer. Trump was installed to usher in the New World Order and to get conservatives to accept it, and it seems to be working. We'll see. This is a book I just picked up, The Story of the Committee of the 300, and this is where that map from the Club of Rome comes from, and a lot of different information is presented about these central planners' ideas for the future. Real quick synopsis. Can you imagine an all-powerful group that knows no national boundaries, above the laws of all countries? One that controls every aspect of politics, religion, commerce, and industry, banking, insurance, mining, the drug trade, pharmaceuticals, the petroleum industry, a group answerable to no one but its members. To the vast majority of us, such a group would appear to be beyond the realms of possibilities and capabilities of any given organization. If that is what you believe, then you are in the majority. The conception of a secret elite group exercising control of every aspect of our lives is beyond our comprehension. Americans are prone to say, it can't happen here. Our Constitution forbids it. That there is such a body called the Committee of 300 is graphically told in this book. When most people attempt to address our problems, they speak or write about they. This book tells precisely who they are and what they have planned for our future, how they have been at war with the American nation for 50 years, a war which we are on the brink of losing, what methods they use, and exactly how they have brainwashed us. If you are puzzled and perplexed as to why things are occurring that we as a nation don't like yet seem powerless to prevent, Goshen, although we are winning, I'm going to get into that in the next video where I'm going to praise my fellow Michiganders for going against the Economic Development Corporation here in Michigan. I love you guys. Michiganders are rising up. The United States is in a depression from which it will not emerge, and why our former social and moral values have been turned aside and seemingly buried. If you are confused by the many conspiracy theories that are rapidly becoming fact every day, the conspirators' hierarchy, the Committee of 300, will clearly establish that these conditions have been deliberately created to bring us to our knees. Once you have read the applying truths contained in this book, understanding past, present, political, economic, social, and religious events will no longer be a problem. And that's what I try to do here as well. The master plans are the Megaregion, which I'm going to switch really quick. The Megaregion. And this book came out in 2015 when the United Nations came to New York and made the deal with Obama here in America for the United Nations Agenda 2030. And this book, The Megaregions, which I have heavily tabbed, America's Future. Megaregions and America's Future. This one came out in 2022. So this idea is not going away. The Department of Transportation has picked it up, and they want to implement it. However, here in Michigan, one of the largest of the megaregions, the Great Lakes Megaregion is what it's termed, is a transnational megaregion, which means we go into Toronto. So from Toronto to Detroit to Chicago, they want to put a high-speed rail. And it's funny because the World Economic Forum has one headquarters in America, and that is in Detroit. And again, the Great Lakes Megaregion is set to be the largest of the megaregions in the United States. So they wanted to be at the heart of the largest megaregion, and they are, unfortunately. So the Department of Transportation wants to implement this, but the rules of Canada are different than the rules of America, and there's two megaregions that go into Canada. The Cascade Mountains over there on the west side also touch into Canada, but then the Mexico border has one megaregion that is transnational with Mexico. So if we were just under one rule in this whole North American continent, it would be much easier to implement the 13 megaregions that they want to by 2050. So they have a bunch of things they want to get accomplished by 2030. And then from there, they have one more generation to finish it off in 2050 to have the New World Order complete with their megaregions and high-speed rails between them. Now, you can be skeptical that they're going to get it done all you want. That's what they have planned. And we have no idea what they're going to do. Plandemics, which a 2008 document that I have to show you talks about a pandemic in the future. Yet another example that this was a plandemic. But anyway, I keep going off on all kinds of tangents. This is all about the digital ID. And so this is just a friendly reminder that billionaire Larry Ellison says a vast AI-fueled surveillance system can ensure citizens will be on their best behavior. Inventory and control of us, the plebs. Now, he doesn't understand, or maybe he does, and he's acceptant of it, but he is also going to be inventory and controlled, but he's hoping that he'll be able to do more than us plebs living in the 15-minute cities, taking public transport only. We must say no to the digital ID. Now we're going to get into the USMCA deal that Trump negotiated and is up for renegotiation. One thing I wanted to say before we jump in is that already the deal has done some damage to the sovereignty of Mexico and what the wishes of the Mexican people are. The United States prevails in the USMCA dispute on biotech corn. So Mexico did not want to take genetically engineered, because that's what they're calling it instead of genetically modified. They switched their terminology to try to confuse you. But they are forcing Mexico to buy our genetically modified corn. And that's only because of the USMCA that Trump negotiated. Excuse me. Washington. So this came out December 20th, 2024, Office of the United States Trade Representative. United States Trade Rep Catherine Tai today announced that the United States has prevailed in its dispute under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, challenging certain Mexican biotechnology measures concerning genetically engineered corn. The USMCA panel agreed that the United States on all 7 legal claims, finding that Mexico's measures are not based on science and undermine the market access that Mexico agreed to provide in the USMCA. Now, I don't know about you, but I want America to ban genetically modified organisms. And so I wish that in this scenario, Mexico would have prevailed. But alas, the deal was made so that the big corporations that create cultivated food, which is lab-grown meat, and genetically modified food can prevail. So just like pharmaceuticals prevail, so do these agricultural replacements. The present dispute challenged 2 sets of measures reflected in Mexico's February 2023 presidential corn decree: an immediate ban on the use of GE corn in dough and tortillas, and an instruction to Mexican government agencies to gradually eliminate the use of GE corn for other food uses and in animal feed. So this is what the Mexican government was trying to do, and unfortunately, the United States stopped them. North America prepares for 2026 USMCA review and potential renegotiation. This is why you're seeing this right away in the news, and I find it very coincidental that Trump created the deal, and within the deal, he said renegotiation in 6 years, and he just so happens to be getting into presidency again right when the renegotiation is meant to take place in 6 years. It's almost as if he knew that he would be president and then Biden would win and then he would be president again. It's almost like it's all planned. And I gotta say really quick that I think that right now we are in the opening of Act 3 for the Great Reset. So Act 1 was the pandemic, and then Act 2 was the aftermath, and now Act 3 is insert World War III, insert whatever have you for 2025, but we are in the opening act. Coming down here, the United States would likely be the primary force behind any changes to the USMCA during the review because the United States was the party that originally proposed the review system. So Trump wanted to review it in 6 years, and Trump gets to. It's just a miracle. Officials from the first Trump administration, which negotiated the USMCA, saw the review system as an action-forcing event the United States could leverage to obtain desired updates to the agreement. In recent remarks about his trade policy agenda, President-elect Donald Trump stated that, upon taking office, I will formally notify Mexico and Canada of my intentions to invoke the 6-year renegotiation provision of the USMCA that I put in. Canada and Mexico, meanwhile, may adopt more defensive strategies seeking to preserve market access and reinsure investors. Now, once again, the Trudeau resigning was part of the opening act. We're out with the old actors, in with the new, and we have some reoccurring characters in Trump and perhaps some of his cabinet, although a majority of his cabinet is very establishment. And that's something that I've discussed with Trump supporters, and yet I don't get a clear answer on why it's okay that the generals that he picked are all establishment when he is supposed to be anti-establishment. The United States review process and objectives. The United States will conduct an internal policy review in 2025, the year preceding the USMCA review, to help formulate and articulate its position. Well, it seems like our position is we want to just own you. According to the United States USMCA implementing law, the United States Trade's representative is required to initiate public consultation on the review at least 270 days before the review, which would be around October of 2025. They would publish a Federal Register notice to invite public comments and hold public hearings, providing opportunities for businesses and other stakeholders to make their voices heard. Subsequently, at least 180 days before the review, and or around January of 2026, USTR must report to Congress outlining its plans. The report to Congress would describe the actions the Trump administration would recommend for the USMCA and a decision on whether the Trump admin would confirm at the 2026 review that the U.S. wishes to extend. Potential U.S. interests. Potential focus areas could include new cooperation mechanisms for supply chain disruptions, expanded anti-forced labor import provisions, new measures to jointly block Chinese companies from the North American market, measures to promote critical mineral development and investment protection, incentives for nearshoring, new border management practices, specialized rules of origin for electric vehicles. Expanded provisions on digital services, including new areas of digital regulation like artificial intelligence. So the renegotiation, we're going to see artificial intelligence in that process. Reopening existing sections of the agreement to settle or relitigate opening disputes. All right. The U.S. industry groups are pressuring the government to revive other disputes, including the U.S.-Canada dairy market. So we have industries and we have globalists that are putting a lot of pressure on basically a North American union, because this trade negotiation is going to be fraught with complications because everybody wants something, right? It'd be a lot easier if we were just one. And I'm not advocating, obviously. I'm for decentralization, not centralization. But I don't want these plans to go through that they're trying to push through. So Mexico begins industry consultations and initial contacts. President Sheinbaum, who took office October 1st, 2024, has placed the defense and improvement of the USMCA at the top of her foreign trade agenda. During the 14th U.S.-Mexico CEO dialogue in Mexico City on October 14th and 15th, the new Secretary of Economy said the meeting marked the starting gun for the promotion, defense, and discussion of the USMCA. On October 17, 2024, the new Undersecretary of Foreign Trade of the Secretariat of Economy, Gutierrez, who has met in October with Morrow to talk about the USMCA review, shared that the Mexican government will soon begin consultations with Canada on the USMCA review process. Mexico does not plan to start formal bilateral talks with the United States until January 2025, once President-elect Trump takes office. Now, this came out 14th November 2024. Should have said that earlier. And it goes into more, but I will leave the links to everything down below if you want to read more. I'm going to go into Canada really quick. I have too much to share to go through everything. Canada is scheduled to hold federal elections on or before October 20th, 2025. So Trudeau just stepped down, but Canada was supposed to have an election this year. So I don't know what's going on with Canada, who's going to replace them. I've got to do some research on that, which may lead to a change in the ruling party. Canada's specific policy. See, this is why I think that he did, because of the trade talks, I think he stepped down early to get in whoever they want in for the next round early. They just do whatever they want. That's what I think. Canada's specific policy agenda for the USMCA negotiations may not be fully clarified until after the new government is seated, though all leading parties support maintaining the USMCA, but initial consultations have already begun. In August of 2024, Canada issued a consultation notice asking for public input on elements of the agreement that are working well and those that can be further improved. The House of Commons Standing Committee on the International Trade also held a series of hearings in May and June 2024 to study the upcoming review. Minister of Export Promotion, International Trade, and Economic Development testified to the importance of preserving the USMCA at the hearings, saying the industry feedback she has received shows that Canada's leaders must do everything we can to preserve, to strengthen, and to deepen the USMCA. Once again, this is just NAFTA 2.0. Same thing as NAFTA, added some measurements, including the Environment Chapter 24, which we're going to discuss right after this. Members of Parliament raised various interests in the hearing, including the importance of protecting Canada's dairy supply management system. Some members of Parliament have also advocated for increasing trade barriers on Chinese imports alongside the United States, which the Canadian government has recently begun doing unilaterally, suggesting Canada could be interested in coordinating those China-related trade policy measures across all three USMCA members. Deputy Freeland recently said she sympathizes U.S. concerns that Mexico is not acting the way that Canada and the U.S. are when it comes to its economic relationship with China. So, U.S.-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement. Congress, in both legislative and oversight capacities, may continue to be active in numerous trade policy issues related to this USMCA, which entered into force July 1st of 2020. Sorry, it keeps doing that. Okay. The USMCA replaced the 1994 NAFTA agreement. Congress approved implementing legislation for USMCA in 2019. After the initial USMCA negotiations concluded in 2018, and before the agreement was in force, some members of Congress expressed concern over certain key provisions and negotiated with the U.S. trade reps to amend the agreement. 2019, U.S., Canada, and Mexico agreed to a protocol of amendment to original USMCA text. Joint review. The USMCA contains a provision providing for a joint review process through which all parties confirm to continue the agreement, the first time such a provision has been included in a U.S. trade agreement. The first joint review is scheduled for July 1st, 2026. If the countries don't make an agreement, they have until 2036 with this agreement. The joint review process, intended to ensure continued relevance and functionality of the agreement, may result in revised text for some provisions to improve the functionality of rules of origin or cover issues that emerged in recent years, such as artificial intelligence. So once again, it's going to be a key factor in the trade negotiations coming up. USMCA, composed of 34 chapters and 12 side letters, retains most of NAFTA's chapters, making notable changes to market access provisions for autos and dairy, rules on claims against sovereign nations. Provisions were eliminated for Canada. The USMCA retains NAFTA's core protections for copyrights, but the copyright term extended to 70 years instead of 50. Criminal and civil penalties for trade secret theft, including by state-owned enterprises and cyber theft. Prohibition on circumvention of technological protection measures. Okay. And then energy. The USMCA removed NAFTA's energy chapter while adding new provisions recognizing Mexico's constitution under the Mexican government, which has complete and direct ownership of hydrocarbons. Now, this is interesting to me because hydrocarbons is exactly what the Arctic has an abundance of resource, and that's what Russia and China are fighting over right now, are hydrocarbons. So this is something I'm not aware of. I've only started hearing about it because of my deep diving into these documents. But I'm going to look into it. I'm interested. In 2022, the United States and Canada launched USMCA disputes against Mexico. Okay. Labor and environment. So this is something that I needed to highlight because it's so important to understand. The USMCA expanded the labor and environment provisions in NAFTA. Parties must adapt, maintain, enforce, and not derogate from statutes and regulations that relate to the International Law Organization Declaration on Principles Rights at Work. Now, this International Labor Organization Declaration is the United Nations. So, while the document itself doesn't say anything about the United Nations or the Paris Climate Accord, I have several articles to show you as well that the United Nations is baked into it. They just hid it because they know that people like me and people like you don't want the United Nations and the World Economic Forum telling America and Americans how to live. And I'm sure that the people in Germany and France, and because it's happening all over the world, I'm sure it's not just Americans. But because I am an American living in Michigan, I have to just speak by my own experience. Adapt, maintain, enforce, and not derogate from environmental laws, including 7 multilateral environment agreements. So the Paris Agreement is not one of them, but we have, through this trade agreement, promised to enforce environmental laws, including 7 multilateral environmental agreements. Multilateral is a United Nations term. It is synonymous with the United Nations. Regarding complaints over alleged violations of such provisions, new provisions shift the burden of proof to the responding party so that a complaint is presumed to affect trade and investment unless otherwise demonstrated. So, when the United States went against the Mexican government for the bio corn, the burden of proof was shifted to Mexico, not to the United States, to say that it did not affect trade. And of course it did affect trade, because the United States couldn't give their poisonous corn. We couldn't give our poisonous corn to Mexico. So because of this provision, Mexico lost. The USMCA also includes a new rapid response enforcement mechanism for worker right complaints at covered facilities, enhanced provisions on anti-worker violence, and a ban on imports made by forced labor. Don't know how you're going to do that when the Republic of Congo right now is littered with forced labor to get the cobalt, which is everything about EVs, but all right, and then we'll go up here. Early October 2025, Federal Register notice date for public comment and public hearing, which I guess I did already discuss because of a different article. The USMCA Digital Trade Chapter also includes more advanced provisions on prohibit data localization policies and limit source code disclosure. So e-commerce data flows and data localization. That is another chapter for another day, but I think it's extremely important that we understand why there's so much push for data mining. I mean, of course, it's because of inventory and control, but that's why there's huge tax breaks for data storage facilities right now. They really want your data and they want to collect it all so they can inventory and control us. All right, the chapter on environment. Chapter 24, environmental law. First time that this has ever been in a trade agreement. Not even Bill Clinton put environment in there yet, but Donald Trump did. Environmental law means a statute or regulation of a party or provision thereof, including any that implements the party's obligation under a multilateral environmental agreement, the primary purpose of which is the protection of the environment or the prevention of a danger to human life or health through the prevention of abatement or control of the release, discharge, or emission of pollutants or environmental contaminants, the control of environmentally hazardous or toxic chemicals, substances, materials, or wastes, and the dissemination of information related thereto, or the protection or conservation of wild flora and fauna, including endangered species, their habitat, and specifically protected natural areas. This basically is like a blanket. Anywhere that there is some flower or fauna that they want to protect, conserve, they can do so because of this trade agreement, and that is going to significantly help Biden's America the Beautiful plan, 30 by 30. 30% of America by 2030 will be conserved. Now, some people will argue that conservation is not the same as preservation, which means preservation means no humans are allowed on that area. Conservation means you're not allowed to extract resources, but you're allowed to be there. Now, personally, by 2030 or 2050, I think that it's going to be preservation. They want us controlled in these mega regions, 15-minute cities and such. They do not want us in wildlife corridors. And this is the wildlife plan from the 1970s, but just reimagined through Biden's America the Beautiful plan. They just rename the same plans over and over and over. They're going to continue to pound the nail with the hammer until they get what they want, or until we finally say enough is enough. Freedom ain't free. We want to be free. We'll see how it goes. This is the great battle over time. It's an exciting time to be alive. You have to have faith, though, that there is a bigger plan in order for it to not be, terrible. Things are being revealed. That's a good thing. I'm sorry, I got on a tangent. Does not include a statute or regulation or provision thereof directly related to worker safety or health, nor any statute or regulation or provision thereof, the primary purpose of which is managing the substance harvesting of natural resources. Okay, so I can't do the entire thing, but I got stuff highlighted. Here we go. Scope and objectives. The parties recognize that a healthy environment is an integral element of sustainable development. Sustainable development is UN Agenda 2030. It never existed before that plan. So that is one way it's baked into Trump's trade agreement, excuse me, integral element of sustainable development, and recognize the contribution that trade makes to sustainable development. The objectives of this chapter are to promote mutually supportive trade and environmental policies and practices, promote high levels of environmental protection and effective enforcement of environmental laws. Again, first time it's in a trade agreement. And enhance the capacities of the parties to address trade-related environmental issues, including through cooperation in the furtherance of sustainable development. Taking account of the respective national priorities and circumstances, the parties recognize that enhanced cooperation to protect and conserve the environment and the sustainable use and management of their natural resources brings benefits that can contribute to sustainable development, strengthen their environmental governance, support implementation of international environmental agreements to which they are a party, and complement the objectives of this agreement. Environmental governance, global governance, New World Order in your face. Zeno, thank you very much for joining us. Everyone should watch the Black Mirror episode called 50 Million Merits to get an idea of what the end future of Agenda 21, 2030, 2050 might look like. Love your show. Thank you very much for being here and for wanting to know exactly what the heck is going on. Gotta go to their own agreements, right? Keep going. All right, so multilateral environmental agreements. The parties recognize the important role that multilateral environmental agreements can play in protecting the environment and as a response of the international community to global or regional environmental problems. Real quick, to your point, highly recommend you check out several Black Mirror episodes because they are unfortunately the dystopian nightmare that is unfolding in front of us on a TV show from when was that, 2010? Maybe a little later? Each party, each party affirms its commitment to implement the multilateral environmental agreements to which it is a party. So here are the agreements. Each party shall adopt, maintain, and implement laws, regulations, and all other measures necessary to fulfill its respective obligations under the following multilateral environmental agreements. Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. So why are they bringing out the fauna and flora again? Of course, that blanket that I told you about, they can use it for whatever they want. It's funny because they said in the Mojave Desert, they used the desert tortoise. They were protecting the desert tortoise and why you couldn't go a lot of places. And now the desert tortoise has to contend with acres and acres and acres of solar panels and wind turbines. So they use it when they want to, and then they ignore it when they need to. The Montreal Protocol on Substances that Deplete the Ozone Layer, the Protocol of 1978 relating to the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, the Convention on Wetlands and International Importance, especially as waterfowl habitat, Convention on Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources. This is something, the Antarctic and the Arctic are both no-go zones for most people, and it would be really nice to try to understand the world we live in if we could go to these places. The International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling and the Convention for the Establishment of Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission. The parties also recognize the importance of public participation and consultation. This just means they need our consent. So we need to be informed so that we can deny them our consent. Or, if you want, you can give them the consent. If you are for the New World Order, we disagree, but there's a need for every kind of idea in the world, I believe. I just think that I like freedom, and not everybody does, so I get it. In accordance with their respective law or policy in the development and implementation of measures to prevent the pollution of the marine environment from ships. Increased protection in special geographic areas. This is something that I didn't understand. It's very vague. What is it talking about? See, these are areas of cooperation that may include emissions from ships, deliberate pollution from ships, increased protection in special geographic areas. Is this talking about the Arctic once again? Alright, so air quality is a part of this. Parties recognize the importance of international agreements and other efforts to improve air quality and control air pollutants, including those that have the potential for long-range transport. I think I have this highlighted because 2025 is the year that everybody knows about geoengineering, in particular solar geoengineering, trying to block out the sun in order to keep temperatures low, all based on this false idea that warmer temperature is bad, even though Russia and Canada would both open up millions of acres if they got warmer instead of being tundra. But I digress. Recognizing they talk about air pollutants and they're polluting it with geoengineering. That's what I was getting at, including those that have potential for long-range transport. Recognizing that the parties have made significant progress to address air pollution in other fora and consistent with Article 25.25, environmental cooperation, the parties shall cooperate to address matters of mutual interest with respect to air quality. Cooperation may include exchanging information and experiences in areas related to ambient air quality planning, modeling, and monitoring, including spatial distribution of main sources and their emissions. Again, data is more important than oil. They want to model and monitor our air quality, and they're going to do this. This is all to get around the carbon tax, and it's very difficult to watch this happen, especially when so many people had hope in somebody, which you shouldn't have hope in any of our politicians, unfortunately. Measurement and inventory methodologies for air quality and emission measurements. And reduction, control, and prevention technologies and practices. This is going to bring about the supply chain issues. Amazon this year is talking about implementing a system. It's kind of like a social credit score, which they already do to their drivers. But basically, if you are a small mom and pop shop selling on Amazon and you can't accurately show that your supply chain is carbon friendly, then you won't be able to sell on Amazon anymore. And that's going to create this position that most businesses are going to have that makes sure that you are being sustainable in your supply chain. It's a whole nother topic for another video, but it's all intertwined. This is it's like a huge spider web. Voluntary mechanisms to enhance environmental performance. The parties recognize that flexible voluntary mechanisms, for example, voluntary auditing and reporting, market-based mechanisms, voluntary sharing of information and expertise, and public-private partnerships can contribute to the achievement and maintenance of high levels of environmental protection and complement domestic regulatory measures. Now, just as sustainable development is synonymous with United Nations Agenda 2030, public-private partnerships are synonymous with the World Economic Forum's Great Reset. This is absolutely fascism, and the United Nations and the World Economic Forum got together just before the Great Reset in the pandemic of 2020, and they made a deal. And so together they are going to inventory and control every resource on this Earth. Trade and biodiversity. The parties recognize the importance of facilitating access to genetic resources within their respective national jurisdictions. consistent with each party's international obligations. The parties further recognize that some parties may require, through national measures, prior informed consent to access such genetic resources in accordance with national measures, and if access is granted, the establishment of mutually agreed terms, including with respect to sharing of benefits from the use of such genetic resources between users and providers. Now, I think I lost what genetic resources are, but I did look it up at one time, yes. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Genetic, gosh, if I could spell. Let's go here. There. Look at that. I can't spell. Materials from plants, animals, microbes, or other sources that contain functional units of hereditary and have value. They can be used for a variety of purposes. This is AI, by the way. I try not to use AI because I don't want it to think for me. But since Google has it built in, you can't get away from using AI. But don't trust it 100% ever in your life. Genetic resources are used in medical research, environmental innovation, and other areas. Examples include medicinal plants, agricultural crops, and animal breeds. Okay. Access to genetic resources and the sharing of benefits arising from their utilization. So that's something that I'm going to keep my eye on and try to get more clarification on, because the AI didn't clarify it enough for me, but I don't have all the time because I have 20 more things to share with you, hopefully. Whoops. For greater certainty, the parties understand that paragraph 2 does not apply to whaling by indigenous peoples in accordance with the parties' law, including for Canada the legal obligations recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982, or those set out in self-government agreements between a central or regional level of government and indigenous people. Highlighted that just, I guess, because self-government, they have different rules if you want to self-govern. I don't know. Environmental goods and services. The parties recognize the importance of trade and investment in environmental goods and services, including clean technologies. Define clean, because I don't think that EV is clean. Cobalt is certainly not clean. Lithium mining is the opposite of clean. As a means of improving environmental and economic performance, contributing to green growth and jobs, and encouraging sustainable development while addressing global environmental challenges. Once again, this is from a president that was supposed to deny that these things actually exist, and that he used to acknowledge that this is a Trojan horse to try to control and change America. And now he has it in his trade agreement. Or this is 2018, by the way, so he's had it in his trade agreement. The parties shall cooperate in international fora on ways to further facilitate and liberalize global trade in environmental goods and services, and may develop cooperative projects on environmental goods and services to address current and future global environmental challenges. So this recognizes that there are global environmental challenges. Now, I think there are, and it's called all those wind turbines that are littering the ocean and the beautiful mountains of Tehachapi over in California and so on. So that's where I think the problem is. Environment Committee and Contact Points. Each party shall designate and notify a contact point from its relevant authorities within 90 days of the date of entry into force of this agreement, in order to facilitate communication between the parties in the implementation of this chapter. Each party shall promptly notify in writing the other parties in the event of any change of its contact point. The parties establish an environment committee, composed of senior government representatives or their designees of the relevant trade and environment central level of government authorities of each party responsible for the implementation of this chapter. Once again, first time ever, the parties establish an environment committee. So now, North America has an environment committee. The purpose of the Environment Committee is to oversee the implementation of this chapter, and its functions are to provide forum, to discuss and review the implementation, periodically inform Commission and Council of the Commission for the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. Consider and endeavor to resolve matters related to Article 2430. Provide input as appropriate for consideration by the Council relating to submissions on enforcement matters under this chapter. Coordinate with other committees established under this agreement as appropriate, and perform any other functions as the parties may decide. That's a pretty blanket statement. Anything could happen under that statement, seems to me, as long as it has to do with the environment. During the 5th year after the date of entry into force of this agreement, the Environmental Committee shall review. And that's where we are now. We are at the review process. Once again, links will be down below. Now, this came out of the New American, January 29th of 2015. After crying conspiracy theory, CNN touts North American Union. Just a few years ago, 2008, it was all a baseless conspiracy theory. Now, promotion of a European Union-style merger between the United States, Mexico, and Canada is being shouted from the rooftops by U.S. taxpayer-funded globalists writing in the very same media outlet, CNN, that tried to ridicule GOP presidential hopeful Ron Paul, gotta love Ron Paul, over the North American Union issue just a few years ago. Indeed, according to the recent opinion piece by 2 mid-level operatives for the New American Foundation, the future of the United States does not rest with the U.S. Constitution, we the people, or even the Supreme Court. Instead, it lies in North America, claimed New America's Martinez and Kurtz Felon. This is not a geographic truism, but a strategic imperative, the duo argued. The United States, Canada, and Mexico are bound by a shared economic, environmental, demographic, and cultural destiny. In recognition of what they refer to as North America's shared destiny, Martinez and Kurtz Felon propose the establishment of what they call a North American passport. Sound familiar? They've been trying to do this passport stuff for a long time on us. The radical passport scheme would eventually facilitate the erasing of U.S. borders in exchange for North American borders, a plot that has been underway for years with Beyond the Border Initiative and other schemes. Much like the EU passport, the tax-funded globalists wrote, the new North American passport would ultimately allow citizens to travel, work, invest, learn, and innovate anywhere in North America. Apparently, at least in the minds of globalists, paid with Americans' tax dollars, the economies of the United States, Mexico, and Canada are far more integrated than recognized by the current immigration system, or lack thereof, in light of Obama's imperial decrees purporting to nullify U.S. immigration laws. And again, 2015, Obama implemented or made the deal with the United Nations, and since then, the migrant crisis has only escalated, and that is because migrants are being used to implement UN Agenda 2030. Once you know the master plan, a couple Great Reset, UN Agenda 2030, Megaregions, then everything kind of falls into place on why they're doing what they're doing, how they're trying to use psyops to trick us into accepting this government, this global governance under the umbrella of the environment. We're at war with ourselves to save the environment. That way we're always at war, which is good for people that make money during war. Banks. Sorry, keep getting on tangents. Phasing out U.S., Mexican, and Canadian passports and replacing them with a single North American one would merely serve to align our laws with reality. Of course, it is true that, thanks largely to North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, U.S. sovereignty has already suffered a severe blow. Unelected North American tribunals, for instance, already purport to overrule state and federal laws enacted by the American people's elected representatives. North American bureaucracies are proliferating too. And this brings me to Goshen. Once again, we're still fighting Goshen, the EV battery plant here in Michigan, but it's only because of all of these things, like NAFTA, that they could bypass us. They say, we're going to bring regional change to your area with Goshen EV battery. But you didn't ask the region if we wanted that change. That's always been the point of contention. They just do what they want to do, and they want to bypass local rules. They're doing it in the UK with wind and solar, and they're doing it here in Michigan with wind and solar. It used to be that the townships had the jurisdiction over zoning for wind and solar, and now the central government, Michigan government, took over that responsibility so that they can bypass the locals who don't want that, who don't want any of this. And again, why would Trump sign something that is NAFTA 2.0? However, Martinez and Kurtz-Flane, I know I'm messing that up. I apologize. I mean no disrespect ever. I'm just not good with names. Claim to view the subversive attack on the independence of American Republic as a positive development. NAFTA, they explained, has created an integrated manufacturing platform and labor market, but it must go much further. The New America duo argued, exploiting any conceivable pretext to eliminate self-government and national sovereignty. This potential must be leveraged regionally with cross-border infrastructure investments and environmental planning. This is why we are going to hear it nonstop about the greater American empire. It has nothing to do with making America great again. It has everything to do with the New World Order, global governance, whatever you want to call it. They wrote after discussing oil production in the North American region. Apparently, corruption-riddled and big government-plagued Mexico is America's linchpin to relations with the countries of Central and South America. So, they argued, give up your sovereignty and merge with Mexico. The inception of NAFTA marked an important step toward leveraging these geographic realities for a shared North American success. Of course, both globalists know full well that the people of all three countries would overwhelmingly reject any such scheming, probably laughing them out of the rooms as kooks, if not seeking prosecutions for trying to subvert the independence of their own nations. So the people must be defied, as evidenced by the recent political firestorm over President Obama's executive move to allow more undocumented workers to avoid deportation. It would take far-sighted and courageous political leadership in all three countries to press for a North American passport, they wrote. As if defying the Constitution, the oath of office to uphold it, and the will of the people somehow represented courage, rather than lawlessness. In fact, they argued that abolishing the borders between the United States and its neighbors would help alleviate our contentious domestic immigration battles. So, here you are, and this was in 2015. The fact that the radical anti-sovereignty screed promoting deeper North American integration was published by CNN, though, is especially ironic. During the 2007 GOP presidential debate, CNN selected a question for Ron Paul, asking him if he really believed in the conspiracy theory about ongoing efforts to build a North American Union. The effort to ridicule Paul backfired big time after he offered an excellent answer, which we're going to watch right now.
Watcher, let's watch, please.
Good evening, candidates. This is Seekster from Arlington, Texas, and this question is for Ron Paul. I've met a lot of your supporters online, but I've noticed that a good number of them seem to buy into this conspiracy theory regarding the Council of Foreign Relations and some plan to make a North American Union by merging the United States with Canada and Mexico. These supporters of yours seem to think that you also believe in this theory. So my question to you is, do you really believe in all this, or are people just putting words in your mouth?
Well, 90 seconds.
Well, it all depends on what you mean by all of this. The CFR exists, the Trilateral Commission exists, and it's a, quote, conspiracy of ideas. This is an ideological battle. Some people believe in globalism. Others of us believe in national sovereignty. And there is a move on toward a North American Union, just like early on there was a move on for a European Union, and it eventually ended up. So we had NAFTA and moving forward a NAFTA highway. These are real things. It's not somebody made these up. It's not a conspiracy. They don't talk about it, and they might not admit about it, but there's been money spent on it. There was legislation passed in the Texas legislature unanimously to put a hold on it. They're planning on millions of acres taken by eminent domain for an international highway from Mexico to Canada, which is going to make the immigration problem that much worse. So it's not so much a secretive conspiracy. It's a contest between ideologies, whether we believe in our institutions here, our national sovereignty, our Constitution, or are we going to further move in the direction of international government, more UN? You know, this country goes to war under UN resolutions. I don't like big government in Washington. So I don't like this trend toward international government. We have a WTO that wants to control our drug industry, our nutritional products. So I'm against all that, but it's not so much as a sinister conspiracy. It's just knowledge is out there. If we look for it, you'll realize that our national sovereignty is under threat.
Congressman Paul, thank you.
Woo! Couldn't say it better then or now. He's always on point. Gotta love Ron Paul. It's really sad that it's taken so long for him to get the recognition, although he's always had recognition in a small pocket of individuals. You know, the Mises Caucus is all about Ron Paul. But I think that he's going to become more and more popular because, just like David Icke, in a lot of ways, what he has said is coming to fruition. So, the UN's magical thinking about Trump's return. I needed to put this in here because I just found it and I thought it was very telling. In 2019, this came out, by the way, January 8th of 2025, and this is foreignpolicy.com. In 2019, when the 15 ambassadors on the United Nations Security Council traveled to Washington for lunch with U.S. President Donald Trump, they thought they'd meet the unpredictable, unfiltered, and vocal critic of multilateralism they'd seen on TV. Instead, the ambassadors encountered a different version of the billionaire-turned-politician. I wonder why that is. I wonder if it's because what's seen on TV is for the plebs, it's propaganda, brainwashing, and the real Donald Trump is, in fact, a billionaire-turned-politician that is implementing UN Agenda 2030 his own way. Trump and his then UN ambassador, Kelly Craft, began with a statement on the need to reform NATO and be tougher on Iran. But once the meeting moved to a private setting, the tone shifted. Trump allowed each ambassador to speak, and he listened attentively. Several diplomats who spoke to foreign policy said Trump was calm, engaged, and appeared generally interested in what they had to say. I found it surprising for a president who was not known for his sympathy for the United Nations to invite the members of the Security Council to the White House, and he and his staff did it with a lot of hospitality. Christoph Husgen, chairman of the Munich Security Conference and Germany's ambassador to the UN at the time, said. He added that he was surprised by how much time Trump dedicated to the ambassadors, who usually do not get that much face-to-face time with presidents. With the second Trump term looming, concerns are rising over the future of the UN and multilateralism. While Trump didn't say much about the UN during his election campaign, the organization has been bracing for drastic budget cuts and an antagonistic administration. However, some hope that Trump's previous interactions with the UN suggest he may not be as hostile to the organization as he seems in public. Of course he's not. You can't be the president without being a puppet. Selected, not elected. Kraft embodied the friendly but inexperienced face of the Trump administration for many in the international community. In 2021, she invited UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to her home state for the Kentucky Derby. It is worth saying that Trump and Guterres had a surprisingly good relationship, Richard Gowan, the International Crisis Group's UN director, said. Guterres worked very hard in 2017 and 2018 to build up some personal connection with Trump, and he succeeded, which, if you think about it, is pretty bizarre. Because Guterres is a lifelong socialist and a devout Christian, and Mr. Trump is definitely not a socialist, and he's a very odd sort of Christian. Yet somehow they hit it off. An odd sort of Christian, I wonder what that means. But you know why they hit it off is because, unfortunately, they're both make Israel great again, not make America great again. Many high-level UN officials even said that Trump admin was easier for the UN to access than President Joe Biden's, especially after the relationship between Washington and the UN deteriorated following Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel and the war in Gaza. Biden did not even extend the courtesy of an official White House visit to Secretary General when even Trump did so during his first term. Chen, a senior fellow at New York University's Center on International Cooperation, said. Still, a spokesperson for the UN chief said that Trump and Guterres haven't spoken since the November election. As I said earlier in this stream, I think that we are in the opening of Act 3. I think the climax of Act 2 was the assassination attempt on Trump. That was the climax, and then the ending of that act was the election, which Trump was already going to win, but it brought in Elon Musk. And I didn't get that idea on my own. I have to give credit to Matt Kim. This YouTube channel, I highly recommend. If I can get to this video, I'd like to share it with you. Otherwise, it will be posted down below. But he's the one that brought it to my attention that that whole situation with Trump brought in Elon Musk. So the technocrats joined with the MAGA, which was awful. And again, that's a public-private partnership, which is the new wording for fascism. Biden did not even extend the courtesy of an official White House. So sorry, I already read that. The diplomatic landscape has also changed since 2020, and Israel's war in Gaza may have worsened Trump's view of the UN. With 2 years left in his term, the UN Guterres' term, Gowan believes that getting along with Trump may not be the Secretary General's top priority either. Trump's choice for UN ambassador in his second term constantly evinces her dismay at what she sees as an anti-Israel bias at the UN. However, diplomats told FP that they believe she is somebody they can work with despite her limited foreign policy experience. The sense is that it could have been much worse. Many UN diplomats and officials hope to bank on their previous relationship with Trump to staunch the bleeding, but others point to unpredictable nature of Trump's first term and that he now has many new faces surrounding him. If some UN agencies think they know what to expect, others hope for the best, but plan for the worst. The agreement on environment cooperation among the governments of the United States, America, the United Mexican States, wow, I didn't know it was called that, and Canada. Under the ECA, this is the EPA, by the way, Environmental Protection Agency. Under the ECA, the United States, Mexico, and Canada will cooperate to reduce pollution, strengthen environmental governance, conserve biological diversity, and sustainably manage natural resources. So this is just the EPA saying they're going to enforce the United Nations Agenda 2030. Yes. See, still can't spell. The International Labor Organization is a United Nations agency document that outlines fundamental labor rights. So this is in the new trade agreement, and it directly links to the United Nations through this organization. New Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary says he spoke with President Trump about creating a North American Union for greater strength. He suggests combining currencies and combining the Bank of Canada with the Fed. So, sorry Canadians, the Federal Reserve took over America in 1913, and within 8 months, we were in World War I, by the way. And now the Federal Reserve is going to take over Canada, it seems. This is all part, though, of the centralization, right? So you need to break down the old. to build up one tower. So the two towers, trade towers in 9/11, they got torn down, and now there's one World Trade Center. That is not by chance. That is by design. That is a symbol of the future.
With President-elect Trump on this issue.
I had two topics that I wanted to talk to him about. Number one was integrating Canada towards a North American Union for greater strength, just period. The world's a difficult place these days, and most Canadians would like to look at that opportunity without giving up their sovereignty. So low-hanging fruit would be combined currency, for example, combining the Bank of Canada with the Fed, things like that. We are the largest trading partners. And just to ask him, because this was on Saturday, to say these meetings you're having with Trudeau and finance ministers from Canada, with all due respect, sir, are a complete waste of time. This guy's going to get eradicated out of the Canadian political landscape. Give the Canadians a chance to re-elect a leader, just like you got re-elected, that has a 4-year mandate, just like you have, and let's get down to business. And I hope they didn't land on deaf ears. I think he saw the rationale in that. That was one topic. But I had another agenda item that was very important to me. And
that's where that ends. Dissecting and unpacking the USMCA environmental provisions, game changer or green governance. Protect the environment is not an extravagance, but rather essential. Depends on who you ask, right? The COVID-19 crisis, with its economic and social impacts, has reminded us of events that countries were not adequately prepared to address. Rising environmental issues leave countries vulnerable to diseases and disasters. Countries should always take steps to address environmental issues. International trade agreements like the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, environmental provisions play an important role in this area. The implementation of the USMCA is fast approaching, so this, was June 5th of 2020. Fast approaching to enter force on July 1st, 2020. In December of last year, the U.S. House of Representatives approved it. Let's go down. The USMCA mostly follows NAFTA, with the addition of new laws on intellectual property protection, the internet, investment, state-owned enterprises, and currency. So there's another chapter, I'm sure, that is worth a deep dive. Noteworthy changes in key areas include incentives to make vehicles in North America and to open Canadian markets for American dairy farmers. The USMCA also recognizes a broad range of environmental topics for trilateral cooperation and introduced a separate chapter on environmental protection that we went over. The environmental provisions of the USMCA are strengthened in several respects, with the inclusion of a list of 7 multilateral environmental agreements, including the UN Law of the Sea. In the event of a conflict between the USMCA provisions and an MEA, the latter will prevail. The parties are also required to implement their obligations under these 7 MEAs, and a provision enables additional MEAs in the future. However, the USMCA fails to include a reference to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. Once again, by design, because Trump at the time was supposed to be anti-UN. That's the note I made, and that's how I feel about it. Conclusion: NAFTA was the first free trade agreement of its type to specifically address the concerns of the environmental community. However, there has been significant concern about the extent to which these environmental provisions have lived up to their potential. All 3 parties to the new North America Trade Agreement acknowledge the importance of the conservation, protection, and enhancement of the environment in their territories. Chapter 24 is envisioned as the most advanced and comprehensive chapter on the environment of any trade agreement. The USMCA provisions support sustainability. ARC, thank you for joining me, says, interesting, they say countries couldn't adequately address the pandemic, but when it came to the lockdowns, they acted like a perfect symphony. Yes, and They even talk about regions. I have an article here. I got to get to the mega regions sometime today. But they tested out their regional capabilities at that time, which I wasn't aware of, especially the California area and then the Northeast, because that mega region is the most advanced right now because it's not transnational. So the New York, New Jersey, up to Boston, that is the mega region that we'll discuss soon. But yes, they got us. They got us. But all is being revealed, and we don't have to consent. So this comes out of CNN. I'm not going to go over any of it, but the bottom, very end of the article. 6 key differences between NAFTA and the USMCA deal that replaces it. This was in 2019. Congress keeps control over biologic drugs. Republicans have long supported including exclusivity provisions for pharmaceutical companies in trade deals, and the pharmaceutical industry quickly came out against the provision's removal. Talking about the provision that was removed from the trade deal would have required 3 countries to provide at least 10 years of exclusivity for biologics. So this just is highlighted because it's important to understand that the pharmaceutical industry is more powerful than government, and that's why they get to affect our trade deals. Eliminating the biologics provision in the USMCA removes vital protections for innovators while doing nothing to help U.S. patients afford their medicines or access future treatments and cures. So, and this is, of course, the CEO of Pharma, a trade group that is, I'm sure, a lobbyist for Big Pharma. But they want to tie in environment to health, so it's not going to be the end of that. United Nations International Day of Multilateralism and Diplomacy for Peace. This is just to showcase that what I said is true. The United Nations and multilateralism go hand in hand. Multilateralism is a part of the United Nations DNA. The Charter does not simply define the structure, mission, and functioning of the organization. It is one of the pillars of the international system in which we live today. While the United Nations has been the multilateral framework par excellence for more than 75 years, multilateral processes have diversified. One of the most visible developments in multilateral diplomacy is undoubtedly represented by the increase in the number of member states from 51 in 1945 to 193 today. They have almost completed their mission, guys. Now, once again, I said 1913 the Fed came in. 1914 we had World War I. The League of Nations was trying to be established during that time. It failed in between World War I and World War II. So what do? They take us to World War II so that they can bring about the United Nations, which is just a new name for the League of Nations, which was very unpopular before World War II. But they created the problem, reaction, solution scenario, the Hegelian dialect, where, okay, you're not going to accept the League of Nations, we'll bring you to war again, and then maybe you will submit. And they did, and we did. In addition to this horizontal expansion, the multilateral framework has also expanded vertically, including new actors such as non-governmental organizations, NGOs, private actors, and other international organizations. 5 flaws in the USMCA and how to fix them. This is from Peterson Institute for International Economics. In brief, the USMCA retains a lot of the existing North American Free Trade Agreement, borrows generously from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, called the TPP, that Trump and many Democrats condemned, and introduces retrograde regulatory mandates and other restrictive measures that will distort North American trade and investment. It does not ensure market access for U.S. exporters of farm and industrial goods any more than the existing NAFTA. Each country can still introduce new border restrictions for national security reasons. But the TPP, Origins and Outcomes, was an international commercial agreement among 12 nations in the Asia-Pacific region, representing about 38% of the global economy. It included wide-ranging obligations to eliminate almost all tariffs and reduce other barriers to trade and investment in goods and services. New rules governing domestic policies that affect international commerce and enforcement and dispute resolution procedures to promote compliance with the TPP provisions. In terms of the breadth and depth of the reforms agreed by the partner countries, the TPP was more comprehensive than any commercial accord since the ill-fated 1948 Charter for an International Trade Organization. So it borrows heavily from the TPP, which everybody that was for the freedom movement, everyone that's anti-establishment that I'm aware of, the Occupy Wall Street people, they were not for the TPP. And so why would Trump heavily borrow from something that he's supposed to be against? I don't think I have anything else highlighted. Oh, I do. Pharmaceutical patent rules need to be better balanced, need to better balance consumer interests. Third, the USMCA echoes the TPP by including patent terms that greatly benefit pharmaceutical companies. 10-year data exclusivity for patents on certain pharmaceuticals, and inadequately protects consumers. Former Senate Finance Chair Orrin Hatch insists on measures to protect Big Pharma from generic competition. Their inclusion in the TPP was among the reasons why Democrats opposed the pact. Those concerns carry over to the USMCA. In brief, the issue is about how to balance consumer and producer interests. Consumers want affordable prices. Allowing competition from generic producers would reduce prices as well as monopoly profits of pharmaceutical patent holders. But those companies argue that reduced revenues would deprive them of resources for the research and development of new medicines. So they affected the trade and they rule. Improved environmental provisions still fail to address climate change. Fourth, in the environmental area, the USMCA is best in class compared to trade agreements signed by other countries, with provisions for the enforcement of multilateral environmental agreements, extensive disciplines on fishery subsidies, and new obligations regarding combating marine litter that are TPP+. But more is needed, of course. Despite considerable talk about a Green New Deal, congressional critics of the USMCA have missed one of the pact's most egregious defects. It does not address global warming, also shunted aside by Obama negotiators for fear of losing Republican support for the TPP. The growing crisis is too critical to ignore any longer. At the very least, the USMCA should promote investment and trade in renewable energy resources and other measures to encourage low carbon emissions. Carrot and stick is always used. They will have carbon tax. In fact, it's already being implemented in things like congestion pricing, which, again, I need to get to, which we're getting close. Already went through that. I don't know why I have that one up. Sorry. Here we go. Although the term only appeared in the aftermath of the Second World War, multilateralism is a significant feature of international relations in the 20th century. The establishment of the League of Nations represents a major turning point in its development. So again, League of Nations was the United Nations 1.0. It was with the creation of the first organization founded to maintain peace and foster international cooperation that modern multilateralism truly took shape and was institutionalized. So, the bank brought us to 2 wars, but it got stuff done. And now it's going to bring us to World War III to get more stuff done. We got to be aware. Today, multilateralism is at the heart of international life. Nevertheless, it remains difficult to grasp and remains relatively little studied. And that's by design, because they don't want you to know about the multipolar world and multilateralism. They don't want you to know about global governance even. They want you to be ignorant. They want us to be ignorant. Megaregions and national economic partnerships. So this is the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration. Finally going to get to the megaregions portion of this video. Megaregions builds on the EDC3 initiative, regional models of cooperation. which promotes efficiency and regional cooperation by identifying best transportation planning practices that can be implemented by jurisdictions who want to work across their boundaries. Megaregions are characterized as networks of urban centers and their surrounding areas, connected by existing environmental, economic, cultural, and infrastructural relationships. Transportation infrastructure provides the foundation and critical mobility between cities and metropolitan areas, including connectivity through and between megaregions. This is where the high-speed rail comes in, which is always criticized as highly inefficient, never going to happen, but it's meant to happen by 2050. So they're starting with the California to Las Vegas high-speed rail, and then of course, like I said, the New York to Boston mega region. They have high-speed rails that they're building and planning, and so it's on the way. But that's the 2050 plan, so it is not as important as the 2030 plan. That comes first. The rise of megaregions delineating a new scale of economic geography. And this came out in 2018. Let's see. The concept of megaregions as a new economic scale has therefore found its way into the academic literature and discussions among policymakers. Again, these two books discuss the megaregion plan. It is not a conspiracy, and it is transnational. It would make everything so much easier if we had one set of rules for all of the North American continent in order to get this megaregion plan into existence. As Ross puts it, increasingly the most appropriate unit of social organization and economic coordination is not the city, not even the metropolitan area. It is the city region, or the region-wide network of cities. We are going to replace states, counties, townships with regions. Recognizing potential megaregions can enable cooperation across administrative boundaries in order to support economic competitiveness and address common challenges at the appropriate scale. And this does, the Regional Plan Association is the one that's implementing the very first megaregion here in America, has been for quite some time. And they're the ones that are responsible for the congestion pricing in New York, which is limiting freedom of movement. So again, carrots and sticks. Your carrot will be subsidies for EVs, and your stick will be congestion pricing. In a worldwide context, the term megaregion is often used to reflect large areas, both in terms of population size and area. UN Habitat identifies megaregions as one of the three types of new urban configurations, along with urban corridors and city regions. Now, you have urban corridors and then you have wildlife corridors. As of right now, they're not saying that the wildlife corridors are going to be people-free, but that's the ultimate goal, because the whole problem with this environmental movement is that, again, it's a war on ourselves. It's very anti-human to the core. And I've said it several times, I will continue to say it, a war on carbon is a war on life itself. So what we're seeing here is that these people think that we're a bunch of parasites basically on Earth, and we're using up all their resources, and so they want to manage them properly, and they think they're the ones that can do it, and they're going to do it through data and digital ID. Infrastructure is a necessary requirement for creating and strengthening social and economic ties between people across places. While the era of digitalization increasingly allows for accessing services and knowledge without the need for actual mobility, physical transport infrastructure channeling goods and labor is still an important factor for the supporting linkages and facilitate functional integration between regions. Policy discussions in a mega-regional context, therefore, often focus on developing new or upgrading existing infrastructure to achieve sustainable goals that are environmentally and socially beneficial. For example, high-speed trains are often discussed as potential solution to overcome the greater distances within a mega-region while limiting the environmental impact that accompanies the greater integration through shifting transport from air or road to rail. Now, East Palestine, Ohio, a high-speed rail is planned to go right through that area. Are the two related? That's up for you to decide. I personally think so. I think that they got wiped out in order to make way for the globalist plans. High-speed rails. I had another point, lost it. I'm sure it'll come back. Now, once again, this will be linked down below so you can look at it yourself. There's a lot of math involved, trying to figure out how to actually develop these megaregions. This is an example over in Europe, obviously, of where the megaregions will be. In all the areas that there are no people, they don't want people. And here is America. The fires in LA. Yes, exactly. And the fires in Maui. This is all, instead of using eminent domain, because they know it's so unpopular, they are using weather weapons. They're using genetic weapons, biological weapons. They are using weapons against us because, unfortunately, our government seems to be at war with us. And it's not just America. It's all the governments are at war with their people in order to inventory and control them. And I'm very sorry for everyone that has suffered fires, obviously, and are suffering now in LA. I don't know what exactly the plan is for that, but the fact that Hollywood is burning is symbolic and necessary. Just like the Phoenix, no matter what, unfortunately, we are at the end stage of this time frame, and no matter what happens, it's going to burst into flames, but a baby will form, brand new ideas can come to fruition. It's just, are we going to have the Ron Paul ideas of national sovereignty, or are we going to have the globalist ideas of a one world government? That's the battle. No matter what happens, the towers are falling, but what are we going to put in their place? Hopefully, good stuff. That's what I'm hoping, and the only way to do that is to be informed. Be informed about what you want and what you don't want. And here is the largest megaregion by 2050, according to the plans of this book, which I will have this one linked, the Megaregions and America's Future. I'll have them linked down below. But they're not showing that Toronto is included in that megaregion because they're only talking about America here. Global Trends 2025, A Transformed World. Now this should have a whole video on its own. I might do that, but I did highlight some things in here that are important for people to understand. So we prepared Global Trends 2025, A Transformed World to stimulate strategic thinking about the future by identifying key trends, the factors that drive them, where they seem to be headed, and how they might interact. So just like Event 201, where they had an exercise, they had a practice, this is the National Intelligence Council's report on what they think the world of 2025 is going to look like, and it gives different scenarios. Just go over some of this. Chapter 1, Globalizing Economy, Back to the Future, Growing Middle Class, Bumpy Ride in Correcting Current Global Imbalances. Chapter 2, The Demographics of Discord, Populations Growing, Declining, and Diversifying. The Pensioner Boom, which we're experiencing right now in 2025. Challenges of Aging Populations. Here in Michigan alone, 400,000 caretakers short for the elderly population, because unfortunately the boomers taught their millennial kids to be selfish and narcissistic, and they are, on average. Obviously there are outliers, but they don't want to take care of their boomer parents, and so the state is going to have to try to take care of them, which is awful. And I love my boomer parents, and I don't blame the boomers for everything. I'm simply stating facts. They, on average, taught millennials to focus on themselves, and that has caused this narcissism we see today. I digress. Chapter 3, The New Players. Rising Heavyweights, China and India. And if you look, there's a Deagle report that's on the conspiracy subreddit. You can still find it to this day, archived, that shows that China and India are not going to experience any decline or depopulation this year. And yet, Germany, America, and the UK, I know Germany and America are supposed to suffer heavy losses in population. Don't know how, don't know why, doesn't say. And the Deagle report is just an amalgamation of information from CIA, FBI, National Security Agency, all that. So they've since deleted it, but it's the internet. You can still find it if you know how. Chapter 4, Scarcity in the Midst of Plenty. For now, by the way, the internet is rapidly changing thanks to flooding the market with AI. The dawning of a post-petroleum age. The geopolitics of energy, water, food, and climate change. Growing potential for conflict. A shrinking arc of instability by 2025. Growing risk of nuclear arm race in the Middle East. Terrorism, good and bad news. How will international system be up to challenges? Multipolarity without multilateralism. Something I'd like to get into. 2025 Global Landscape, comparison between Mapping the Global Future report of the Intelligence Council 2020 project and Global Trends 2025, the transformed world. Globalization at risk with the 2008 financial crisis. And some people would say that that was really the beginning of the Great Reset, but 2020 is the official start. Science and technology leadership, a test for emerging powers. Latin America, moderate growth, continued urban violence, women as agents of geopolitical change. They certainly are focusing on women in almost every document. Women and children are a focus. And again, it's because if you are running a depopulation agenda, so that way you can inventory and control people much easier if you have less of them, women are the ones that have babies. And so it's important to brainwash women to not have babies. Higher education shaping the global landscape in 2025. The impact of HIV/AIDS. Muslims in Western Europe. Timing is everything. 2 climate change winners. Again, those are going to be Canada and Russia, because if it warms up, then they're no longer a tundra. Didn't even mean to rhyme, but hey. Another use of nuclear weapons, why Al-Qaeda's terrorist wave might be breaking up. That'd be interesting to see since Al-Qaeda's in the news again. And in fact, I have an article or a little clip right here I'll share. Apparently, questioning 9/11 narratives bothers the terrorists at the CIA because it inhibits their ability to sell you narratives that utilize the same boogeymen they created over and over. Whitney Webb, gotta love her. No 9/11 truther backs Al-Qaeda or views them as rebels. The overwhelming view in 9/11 Truth is that Al-Qaeda is a proxy for the intelligence services of the U.S. or a U.S. ally. Exactly. You can't blame 9/11 Truth when the actual people backing Al-Qaeda are the consecutive U.S. presidential administrations that backed Al-Qaeda in Syria for now successful regime change purposes. This is only 27 seconds long. Let's listen to what this CIA agent has to say about 9/11 truthers.
Al-Qaeda found the Building 7 conspiracy stuff fascinating. And they have actually had discussions about how we could do ruses and bring in the Building 7 people to make them blame their government more. So they're actually even looking at our conspiracies and targeting those people for the homeland attack. So basically, those people almost back Al-Qaeda as revolutionaries and rebels and heroes against our government. Al-Qaeda
Obviously, shouldn't have to say it, but nothing could be farther from the truth. I myself, in 2011, became a 9/11 truther while I was still in the military. It was weird that after 10 years, it seems like a spell was broken, because it wasn't just me, it was all my military buddies finding things about 9/11 and how our government had the most to benefit from the situation, and how it's so impossible that the stars could align, that some Muslim that's living in a cave could hijack a plane and crash it into America's towers. It's unreal. But I joined the military thinking I was going to protect the country and freedom. And, I learned while I was in how that was a brainwashing propaganda technique that was successful on me. But 9/11 was the first truth. 2011 was when I began down the path of truth seeking for real, realizing that nothing is as it seems, and that you have to look for the truth for yourself. So, getting back to where I was, if I can find it, here we are. Potential emergence of global pandemic. So again, this came out in 2008, and it's talking about a potential emergence of a global pandemic in 2025. Greater regionalism plus or minus for global governance. All right, so global landscape, a global multipolar system is emerging with the rise of China, India, and others. The relative power of non-state actors, businesses, tribes, religious organizations, and even criminal networks also will increase. By 2025, a single international community composed of nation-states will no longer exist. Power will be more dispersed, with the newer players bringing new rules of the game, while risks will increase. The traditional Western alliances will weaken. Rather than emulating Western models of political and economic development, more countries may be attracted to China's alternative development model. Now, we are unfortunately implementing China's model here in America with the digital ID, and the social credit score system that is being put in place. Of course, it's not called social credit score. FICO score is what Amazon's using, but ultimately it's the same thing. You have a bad driving record, that will affect your social credit score, which will affect your work. So Amazon drivers, if they get dinged for, let's say, taking their hand off the wheel for too long and the AI dings them, they could lose out on a job for that day because of that. That's a social that's a social credit score. The United States will remain the single most powerful country, but will be less dominant. Relative certainties. The U.S., or the unprecedented shift in relative wealth and economic power roughly from west to east now underway will continue. Continued economic growth coupled with 1.2 billion more people by 2025 will put pressure on energy, food, and water resources. Now, you would think if you know that in 2008, then why wouldn't you do something to fix it? Unless you want to put pressure on energy, food, and water resources, because those are the things that are necessary to control people. Make them scarce, and you control the people. The pace of technological innovation will be key to outcomes during this period. All current technologies are inadequate for replacing traditional energy architecture on the scale needed. Terrorism is unlikely to disappear by 2025. But its appeal could lessen if the economic growth continues in the Middle East and youth unemployment is reduced. For those terrorists that are active, the diffusion of technologies will put dangerous capabilities within their reach. Opportunities for mass casualty terrorist attacks using chemical, biological, or, less likely, nuclear weapons will increase as technology diffuses and nuclear power programs expand. The practical and psychological consequences of such attacks will intensify in an increasingly globalized world. Whether an energy transition away from oil and gas, supported by improved energy storage, biofuels, and clean coal, is completed during the 2025 timeframe. Yeah, right. How quickly climate change occurs in the locations where its impact most pronounced. whether global powers work with multilateral institutions to adapt their structure and performance to the transformed geopolitical landscape. Emerging powers show ambivalence toward global institutions like the UN and IMF, but this could change as they become bigger players on the global stage. Asian integration could lead to more powerful regional institutions. NATO faces stiff challenges in meeting growing out of area responsibilities with declining European military capabilities. Traditional alliances will weaken. So again, this could take a whole video, but let's get into a couple things. Greater Asian regionalism, possible by 2025, would have global implications, sparking or reinforcing a trend towards 3 trade and financial clusters that could become quasi-blocs: North America, Europe, and East Asia. So, this reminds me of Brave New World, right? Or was it 1984? I think it might be 1984, where they have 3 major continents that everybody is living in. Establishment of such quasi-blocs would have implications for the ability to achieve future global World Trade Organization agreements. Regional clusters could compete in setting trans-regional product standards for information technology, biotechnology, nanotechnology, intellectual property rights, and other aspects of the new economy. So, biotechnology and nanotechnology are the new economy. So I told you about United Nations Agenda 2030, and then you have the Great Reset. Then you also have the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is merging man and machine, and transhumanism is included in that, which is where Elon Musk ties into this whole thing with putting a chip in your head, and so on and so forth. It's all connected. Can't get it all out in one video as much as I want to. On the other hand, an absence of regional cooperation in Asia could help spur competition among China, India, and Japan over resources such as energy. The United States, less dominant power. By 2025, the U.S. will find itself as one of a number of important actors in the world stage, albeit still the most powerful one. Even in the military realm, where the U.S. will continue to possess considerable advantages in 2025, advances by others in science and technology, expanded adoption of irregular warfare tactics by both state and non-state actors, proliferation of long-range precision weapons, like directed energy weapons, perhaps, and growing use of cyber warfare attacks increasingly will constrict U.S. freedom of action. So, there are a lot of people on YouTube that I watch. Sean Ryan was one of them, although he says he's a prior spook, he's still a spook. Then there's others like Benny Johnson, who perhaps they started out not part of the establishment, but have since been captured. And then you have this guy, Hustle Bitch. Excuse my French, but that's the name of his channel, although he might have had to drop the bitch part because of YouTube algorithms and such, but I will link his video down below and him discussing directed energy weapons, because there's a syndrome that, if you guys know it, please remind me. It starts with an H, that people in Cuba were experiencing, CIA agents in Cuba. Basically, it was a frequency weapon, a 5G, potentially, a microwave weapon, which microwave weapons can operate in the 5G range. So that's something we're going to need to be aware of in 2025, and I talked about it in my chaos video. And by the way, I did a video on the Megaregions. I will remember, Michelle, to link it down below. I will link it down below, but please check it out, because I go into a lot more on the Megaregions than I'll be able to get to today. A more constrained U.S. role has implications for others and the likelihood of a new agenda issues being tackled effectively. Despite the recent rise in anti-Americanism, the U.S. probably will continue to be seen as a much-needed regional balancer in the Middle East and Asia. The U.S. will continue to be expected to play a significant role in using its military power to counter global terrorism. On newer security issues like climate change, U.S. leadership will be widely perceived as critical to leveraging competing and divisive views to find solutions. At the same time, the multiplicity of influential actors and distrust of vast power means less room for the US to call the shots without the support of strong partnerships. Developments in the rest of the world, including internal developments in the number of key states, particularly China and Russia, are also likely to be crucial determinants of US policy. Havana syndrome. Thank you, Zeno. Pop-O-Matic says that Trump has a chip in his head. You know, it's very possible. I've seen him kind of glitch. If I can find that video, I will try to post that one below as well. But he was seen walking, and then he kind of has like a glitch. People say that he's a cyborg. He's been replaced. He's always been a cyborg. He has a chip in his head. Who knows? What I do know is Elon Musk is not the genius that he told you he was. He is a DARPA PR rep. That's what he is. The above trends suggest major shocks and surprises, which we highlight throughout the text. Examples include nuclear weapons use or a pandemic. In some cases, the surprise element is only a matter of timing. They timed it right with that pandemic, didn't they? An energy transition, for example, is inevitable. Why? Who voted for the people that made it that it has to be inevitable? Because if you actually look into oil, oil is like water. It'll never run out. It is not a fossil fuel. Fossils do not create oil. So why can't we just make the current system as clean as possible instead of destroying the world with this new system of lithium mining and cobalt mining? Oh, that's right. It's because electricity can be controlled remotely. That's why the war on natural gas that everybody said was a conspiracy theory, and now Biden is talking about it and banning it. It's like, I had a whole video planned, but of course I never got to it, on natural gas and how they are allowing a globalist, very famous chef in California to keep his natural gas stoves in his establishment, in his restaurant, because otherwise he would move, because he's going to use natural gas. So they gave him an exception, and he was even in the Rockefeller news press releases at the Rockefeller Foundation. So rules for thee, but not for me. That's how they like to work. They don't want to be controlled, but they want us controlled, and electricity is the way to do it. An energy transition from one type of fuel, fossil fuels, to another, alternative, is an event that historically has only happened once a century at most, with momentous consequences. The transition from wood to coal helped trigger industrialization. In this case, a transition, particularly an abrupt one, out of fossil fuels would have major repercussions for energy producers in the Middle East and Eurasia, potentially causing permanent decline of some states as global and regional powers. Do you think they care, though? I don't think they care. They have a plan in mind, and they will allow whoever to die for it that needs to die for it to do so. In a world without the West, the new powers supplant the West as the leaders of the world stage. October surprise illustrates the impact of inattention to global climate change. Unexpected major impacts narrow the world's range of options. Now, it's funny because this October surprise was supposed to come in 2020. And instead of something to do with climate change, they decided to go with a pandemic. And then here's the BRICS bust-up. Disputes over vital resources emerge as a source of conflict between major powers, in this case, two emerging heavyweights, India and China. So this is a scenario that could happen this year, according to these people and their think tanks. Now, of course, garbage in, garbage out with any model or any kind of plan, but these people have put the best and brightest together to try to get the plan set and implemented. In politics, it's not always local. Non-state networks emerge to set the international agenda on the environment, eclipsing governments. And that is happening. It's not happening exactly the way this says, but it's happening. I've seen it with Goshen, again here in Michigan on the Big Muskegon River, second largest river in Michigan, and we don't want an EV battery manufacturing plant on our river. And yet, the locals didn't get to decide. Well, we are deciding because we're making it. We're loud. Thank God for loud Michiganders. Driving the green transition through trans-regional connectivity and collaboration. So this is just showing that megaregions are already occurring over in Europe as well. Germany has a megaregion. The state of the megaregion. You know what? Sorry. I think I highlighted that because I highlighted something here. We'll see. Maybe not. Sorry. It's obviously this is a very long document. Highly recommend you look at it because this is what the globalists think is going to happen in 2025 all the way back in 2008. Well, sorry. There we go. In this fictionalized scenario, a new world emerges in which nation-states are not in charge of setting the international agenda. The dispersion of power and authority away from nation-states has fostered the growth of subnational and transnational entities, including social and political movements. Growing public concerns about environmental degradation and government inaction come together in this example to empower a network of political activists to wrest control of the issue out of country-level officials in capitals. Global communications technologies enables individuals to affiliate directly with identity-driven groups and networks that transcend geographic boundaries. Environmentalism is an issue for which there is widespread confluence of interests and desires. That's this one scenario they have for this year. Ha, yes. This probably would not have come about without a succession of environmental disasters. The New York hurricane was a trigger, and this is September 14th, 2024. In this fictitious thing they got going on, this is like a news article, okay? A fake news article. This probably would not have come about without a succession of environmental disasters. The New York hurricane was a trigger. Importantly, the fact that it happened about the time of UNGA, which many of these networks and groups have been scheduled to attend, facilitated the initial coalescence. However, it would not have happened without other events like the cyclone a year earlier that devastated Bangladesh, and the recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report showing much higher levels of CO2 despite efforts at cutbacks. So, whenever the UNGA is happening this year, we need to pay attention. Hopefully they don't create some hurricane for New York. Or has that already happened, do you think? Oh, Pop-O-Matic, I'm sorry, I was talking about Elon as well. Possibly being a robot. And again, he's a DARPA PR agent. He's not a genius. Especially, yeah, you look at his baby mama, I'm sorry. Anyway, that's a topic for another video. In a sense, we have reached the promised land. Wait. A crisis atmosphere prevailed. Indeed, it was one of these moments in history which a new millennium or apocalyptic atmosphere was operating, as if the end of the world was nigh and immediate action was needed. See, this is what they want. They want to bring order out of chaos, and the best way to do that is to make it like the end of the world is nigh. In a sense, we have reached the promised land in which global cooperation is more than a conspiracy among elites, but bubbles up from the grassroots across historical, national, and cultural divides. We had hoped for this with the European Union, but never achieved it. Everyone maintained his narrow, parochial view, speaking first as a Frenchman or Pole, not as a European. A lot of this can be ascribed to the rise of the middle classes in Russia, China, and India. Like their Western counterparts before them in the 19th and 20th centuries, they are wealthy enough now to decry the health hazards associated with pollution and rapid growth. They wanted their governments to take action, but they did not. The middle classes have been incensed, by the shoddy construction and poor planning that led directly to a large number of casualties when disaster struck. Institutions were more savvy than governments in detecting the change. The annual Davos meeting was transformed several years ago. It brought in a host of activists from these networks and has since established virtual meetings where thousands more could participate. This has happened, by the way. And they have the New Champions, which is a Davos thing. They've done all of this. The pressure became too much for member states to ignore. The UNGA set aside 20 seats for NGOs who yearly competed among themselves to take up a seat for a year and have the same voting rights as nation states. International politics is forever changed, even though I doubt these networks can be as effective on other issues. The environment was tailor-made because the widespread commonality of interest in avoiding Armageddon. It was tailor-made exactly for that, so that they can justify a one-world government. At another time, or on a different issue, my guess is national, religious, ethnic, and class differences will resurface, but the achievement stands and the precedent set will make it hard for governments to ignore NGOs. Maybe they can even begin to partner. But I highlighted this. We have reached the promised land in which global cooperation is more than a conspiracy among elites, but bubbles up from the grassroots across historic national and cultural divides. That sounds like a globalist dream, certainly not mine. All right, reclaiming public space for health equity. I have a few more things, 4 more things I want to get through at the least. I really appreciate you hanging out. I told you it'd be a longer one, but this information is important and it all goes together. So, public spaces are at the heart of urban life. Real quick, this is the RPA, the Regional Plan Association, the one that's implementing the first megaregion being built here in the United States. Public spaces are the heart of urban life. They are the music between the concrete of the built environment. Since they serve as essential third places where we gather, stay active, and connect, these spaces foster a collective sense of belonging, transforming neighborhoods and cities into vibrant communities. 15-minute cities. Public spaces can contribute to a neighborhood's climate resilience, improve its air quality, and disperse emissions, create localized economic opportunities, and make space for active modes of mobility, meaning not cars, okay? Not private transportation. This is public space, and it's going to be public transportation only with AI cars. AI is driving cars. No humans will drive. And that's the only way that the taxi service using a flying drone, it will not work unless it's all AI that's on the roads. Then it can all be programmed, right? Human beings can be programmed, and yet we have a spirit. We are part of the other realm, and so we can break the programming unexpectedly. That's the difference, and will always be the difference between us and artificial intelligence. It can never transcend, right? The AI doesn't get their ideas from the other side. It gets its ideas from us, who gets it from the other side. So it's a weak echo of what we're capable of and always will be. That's not to say it can't enslave us, but it's our Frankenstein, or rather we're Frankenstein and we've created the monster. Contribute to healthier and happier communities by bringing people closer together. Hey, Ark, I just stumbled across this channel. Good work. Subscribe. Sorry for interrupting. Never apologize for interrupting. I love talking to you guys. I don't get to talk as much as I want, but I appreciate you commenting and hanging out with me. So, and thanks for the sub, man. Or woman. While the term public space often conjures... I did this the other day when I was reading out loud to my husband. While the term public space often conjures thoughts of parks, plazas, walkways, or other images of urban spaces, we define public space as a broader concept that includes all areas where people gather. whether privately or publicly owned. When I read that, I could not believe what I was reading. Privately or publicly owned. And so what they're doing is this is part of the whole stick thing, right? My husband just got home, so I might be distracted again for a minute. But they are narrowing our highways, they're taking away lanes in downtown, they're making it painful to drive. That is part of the sticks. It's not just the congestion pricing, but it's also taking away roads to make it harder to navigate the roads that we have, and they're doing it in the name of reclaiming public space for health equity. And again, privately or publicly, there's no respect for private property in this communitarianism worldview. In this conception, a subway car is public space, and so is a 6-lane highway, and that they both support various kinds of human interaction and to varying degrees. This broad definition opens up public spaces to become much more than third places for infrastructure. Public spaces can transform into hubs for community health, providing access to fresh food and health care. They can address injustices from disruptive planning and become centers for holistic, community-driven improvements. They can attract public and private investments to uplift underserved communities. Underserved communities. In this manner, public spaces can serve as infrastructures of community care while simultaneously allowing communities to reclaim these spaces and integrate belonging and cultural identity in innovative ways. And then, of course, Flint, Michigan is the first up. They have transformed some of their roadways into a market. Now, I'm not against farmers markets. I am absolutely for them. However, these farmers markets created by the government are highly surveilled with AI, and so they can inventory and control the produce and the resources within that area. So I like the farmers markets that are actually out in the country, preferably, but they don't want us to live in the country. Priorities of 2025. Brent, hey, good afternoon. Sorry I didn't see you, Ron. Been out running errands in all the snow-covered roads. Well, drive safe. Hopefully you're not in the zone where you're getting dumped on down south of Michigan. We only got a couple inches here and there so far, knock on wood, this year, and hopefully this whole climate oasis that the New World Order claims Michigan will be by 2050 is here now, because I love snow, but I'd rather less snow and warmer, like Tennessee. If we can have that kind of weather, I'm all for 4 seasons, and I'm getting on the sidetrack. But thank you for joining me, Brent. I'm almost done, but please, I hope you go back and listen to all the information I've shared, because it's a lot. And I tried to put about 15 hours worth into 2, and I'm going over just a little bit, but we're going to push forward just a few more things. Key priorities for 2025 include continued support for the Gateway program, Penn Station, and the Port Authority bus terminal, so all public transportation, multimodal. I went over this a lot with the Maui plans because it's all about pedestrians and walking, and of course it's for safety. They're saying get the cars off the road for safety, but really it's for control. Implementing and monitoring the launch of congestion pricing. So these people are the ones that are responsible for the congestion pricing going on in the Megaregion on the northeast side. New York in particular is the largest city in that Megaregion, so that's what everybody talks about. Ongoing efforts to address the region's housing affordability crisis. Support for investments that drive the transition to a net zero carbon emission economy by 2050. Advancing regional resilience through comprehensive strategies, and then ensuring the success of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. This is the 2050 right here. Outcomes of America 2050. So this right here is a picture of a 15-minute city. And this is all by that same planning committee. This is where you get that right here, the Great Lakes Megaregion, and see how it goes across to Toronto. So it's transnational. This is the largest megaregion as of right now, and that is being built. The Northeast powerhouse, 20% of the nation's gross domestic product. And then you have the Gulf Coast has a megaregion, Florida, the Atlantic, which would be Atlanta, Georgia, and then what is that, Birmingham, Alabama, I think. And then you got the Carolinas. And on the west side, you have Cascadia, which goes up, is also transnational. And down here, the Gulf Coast, I believe, or perhaps it's the Arizona Sun Corridor. No, that's the Arizona Sun Corridor. The Texas Triangle is right here. So it must be, yes, the Gulf Coast goes down into Mexico. So there's another transnational mega region that needs the same rules in order to actually accomplish the mega region. The recognition of the mega region as an emerging geographical unit also presents an opportunity to reshape large federal systems of infrastructure and funding, such as future surface transportation bills, the reorganization of Amtrak, housing and urban development authorizations, and foreign policy. Just as the interstate highway system enabled the growth of the metropolitan regions during the second half of the 20th century, emerging megaregions will require new transportation modes that work for places 200 to 500 miles across. The key new links in the mobility system are likely to be high-speed rail lines. So, again, the Hunger Games Society, or Ayn Rand's book, what is it called? Not The Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged. That's what that reminds me of, with the high-speed rails. If you have not read or listened to the audiobook of Atlas Shrugged, I highly, highly recommend. It's an excellent book for your 2025 adventure. In addition, new freight systems will be needed to meet growing goods movements needed. Oh my goodness. I'm getting tired. Sorry. Let me retry that. In addition, new freight systems will be needed to meet growing goods movement needs, including truck-only toll roads on key interstate highway corridors linked to improve rail freight systems in airports and seaports. The improvements will create new capacity, making the nation's goods movement system more efficient and reliable. Again, you're seeing from Detroit, I think, to Traverse City, they're trying to do something like a high-speed rail. They're doing toll roads. They're talking about toll roads in Michigan. And I'm just using Michigan as an example. This is happening in every state and really every country. But because Michigan is full of resources that the New World Order wants, it's very easy for me to use our state as an example because they're here and they're messing around with us. And we're fighting them already. Promote new financing decision frameworks. The mega-regional planning approach does not propose establishing new mega-regional governments. Rather, strategic partnerships across regional and state boundaries should be forged to meet challenges experienced at the mega-regional level. New user fees, such as congestion pricing or HOT and TOT lanes on toll roads, link charges to those who benefit the most from new investments, creating new revenue streams. So let me go back. To implement the ambitious set of investments described above, mega regions will need to explore new and innovative financing systems to raise new funds. Public authorities can use their tax-free status to attract private dollars through the bond, insurances, sales, and lease-back arrangements. New user fees, such as congestion pricing, will help create new revenue streams. So more taxes, more taxes. And again, the rich don't care about these taxes. They don't care about congestion pricing. They can afford to pay them. They will pay them. It's going to be the people, the poor people in the middle class that are going to be pushed and forced onto public transport, and the people that want private transportation, they'll still use public transportation, but they won't have to get into an EV that an AI is driving and then go to another stop and pick up strangers, because that's what the New World Order wants. Is even in a car, like an Uber, you're going to have to meet up with strangers and have them ride with you if you guys are going to the same area. And I love people, but I don't want to ride in a car with strangers. I like having private mode of transportation. Despite the long tradition of local control over land use decisions, the federal government has historically played a strong but silent role in shaping American land use. From the interstate highway system to federal flood insurance programs that make housing construction possible in flood-prone areas, the shape of modern America is a result of a series of federal policy decisions with direct impacts on America's built environment. Rather than expanding or eliminating the federal role in land use planning, the land impacts of federal policies should be acknowledged and reformed to support clearly articulated national priorities for growth, sustainability, and economic competitiveness. Bruce Babbitt, the former Secretary of Interior, proposed that the federal government use conditionality of federal funding to induce localities to conform to national policy objectives. Basically, hey, Green Charter Township, we won't give you any benefits whatsoever. We will punish you if you do not let EV Goshen battery plant be created in your area. That's what it says to me. We will punish you if you don't do our central planning initiatives. Local government. Currently, many of the federal agencies that affect land use decisions, such as the Department of Transportation and Department of Interior, are unable to collaborate meaningfully with other relevant federal agencies because they are housed in bureaucratic silos. So, they don't like that. And the greater American empire would help bring these plans to fruition. I hope that I clearly stated why throughout this entire video. This is the last thing I'm going to share with you. The rest of the stuff I will try to put in a different video. But this is Vision for the Blind. This was Trump over a year ago proposing to build 10 new freedom cities across the United States. Freedom cities is just a clever way to say 15-minute cities. Now, I think it's a clever way to say megaregions, which are comprised of 15-minute cities.
Past generations of Americans pursued big dreams and daring projects that once seemed absolutely impossible. They pushed across an unsettled continent and built new cities in the wild frontier. They transformed American life with the interstate highway system. Magnificent it was. And they launched a vast network of satellites into orbit all around the Earth. But today, our country has lost its boldness. Under my leadership, we will get it back in a very big way. If you look at just 3 years ago, what we were doing was unthinkable. How good it was, how great it was for our country. Our objective will be a quantum leap in the American standard of living. That's what will happen. Here are just a few of the ways we can do it. Almost 1/3 of the land mass of the United States is owned by the federal government, with just a very, very small portion of that land, just a fraction, 1/2 of 1%. Would you believe that? We should hold a contest to charter up to 10 new cities and award them to the best proposals for development. In other words, we'll actually build new cities in our country again. These freedom cities will reopen the frontier, reignite American imagination, and give hundreds of thousands of young people and other people, all hardworking families, a new shot at home ownership and, in fact, the American dream.
All right. He goes on to discuss his plans, but I thought that was interesting because 10 freedom cities, the original Megaregions plan was only 10, but they have it since expanded to 13, which again, that reminds me of the Hunger Games. They had 13 districts. Real quick, I wanted to go to news. After years of debate, congestion pricing looks like it's coming to New York City. So this was December 31st, 2024. And so this is just one example of what we're fighting. She said deterring at least some people driving into the city to improve traffic flow. But see, the traffic flow wouldn't be so bad if you weren't reclaiming public spaces. See? So they're creating the problem and giving you the solution that they want. The second is that through the toll that will be incurred by drivers, it will help fund mass transit improvements. So yeah, you are paying for your own enslavement. Not only are you getting fined, but those fines are going to go towards the public transportation that will replace your private vehicles. Because in the New World Order, you will own nothing, and allegedly, you will be happy. Alright, guys. I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and take care of yourself. 2025 is going to be a hell of a year, but don't let the psyops get you. In fact, I have to do this. I'm going to show you this video really quick. I'm sorry. I'm changing it up. I'm sorry if you left. But this is Matt Kim, and I'm going to show you this, and then I'm going to leave you on a good note. I'm going to show you a cat video. I have to find it really quick.
Do a little bit of recollection. I mean, one of the things for me is the man got shot in the face.
Oh, that was... I don't even know if I believe that anymore.
That's why I said quotes. He got shot in the face.
Okay.
Sorry, the video is called One Man Made Both of These Photos, and he's talking about the photos of Bush when he was sitting there reading the books, or rather the children's book during 9/11. The same photographer that took that picture of Bush took the picture of the bullet whizzing towards Trump's face. Now, I don't believe in coincidences. I think that's on purpose, but let's continue.
I mean, it's one of the most, I mean, let's be honest. It is one of the most profound pictures of all time.
The most gangster picture ever.
That's a great word, gangster. He is true OG now.
However,
was it real?
Was it real?
Are we going there right now? I mean,
so
isn't it all just a game, Matt?
I'm gonna mess up the numbers, but in order to capture the bullet flying at that frame rate, at that shutter speed, which is, I think, 1/2500, 1/5000 is what you have to shoot it at.
I think it's more like 1/12,000.
Whatever that number is. It is not a shutter speed that photographers would typically shoot in.
In bright light like that? No.
Never.
No way. You wouldn't get enough light.
But for some reason, a photographer, the same photographer that caught that picture, is the same photographer that was there when George Bush did the...
He was doing the ritual.
When he was doing the ritual?
He was doing the ritual summoning. The ritual summoning at the children's school when he was reading kite, fly, steal, plane, crash. Really interesting use of words.
And isn't it interesting that he said kite?
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I mean,
like, that glanced over for me for a long time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You didn't know that was a derogatory word for a particular type of people group?
I thought kite was referring to, like, flying an airplane.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it's like one of those moments where you're like, that's what that was.
That's what that was. And I think this is a perfect opportunity, considering our growth and considering the viewage and all of that, to remind everybody out there of all of the amazing dancing Israelis. I mean, there's nothing better than Googling dancing Israelis, because you'll find some amazing things out there of dancing Israelis.
I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the assassination attempt, because to belittle it, if it were to be true, even it's very likely to be true that that really did happen, then to say that taking an assassination attempt on the president's life is, I don't want to take that too lightly.
Well, we are not taking it lightly. If we can, I'm gonna.
I think that's a serious thing.
It is a serious thing, no doubt. But I'm going to pull from J.D. Vance, and I'm going to pull from Donald Trump himself. Meaning, I'm going to care about the realness of this event, of him getting shot in the face, as an inverse function to how much they care about it. Meaning, J.D. Vance and President Trump elect seem to not ever care about this thing. So you know what that means? I care about it a lot. There's no way, brother. Maybe I'm a smaller man. Maybe I'm a terrible, as the X comments these days say, small wee wee, small PP, small Korean PP. Because it's like it's either pooflingin or small PP right now are the comments. I might have a small PP, and that's okay. But
Clip it.
clip it. But I'm gonna tell you guys, if I was shot in the face, I'd be talking about this shit all the time. They'd be doing interviews and they'd be saying, "This is Peter, the guy who got shot in the face." Like
My Twitter bio would read assassination attempt survivor.
You'd go hard on that.
Why not?
You'd own it.
Own it.
But the fact that like J.D. Vance and Mr. President Trump elect both seem to really gloss over this harrowing moment, which fair enough, it's a harrowing moment, scary moment. But
it disappeared from the news really fast.
well, there's no closure. Who, why, what? These questions have still not been answered. The who, why, what. All we know is we have a dead body. There was
Well, JD did tell us the why.
oh,
He said, clearly, this person hated President Trump.
oh.
Clearly. Don't know the motivation other than that. Don't know who he was working with. But what we know for sure is that they
Yeah, and I don't watch Trump's rallies, so I can't attest to that, Brent, but thank you for letting me know. Trump has talked about it at his rallies. Before he became president, that was a big thing. He took a bullet for democracy. I remember getting flyers in the mail that I paid for, taxpayers paid for. The flyer in the mail said he took a bullet for democracy. So there definitely was, it seems like it was an act, and it definitely, like in a play. That's what I mean. Like an act in a play, like a scene, rather. It was a scene in a play, and it definitely changed things. It changed people's ideas of Trump around me, personally, that I know that he is now the savior. God saved him. So that is very powerful magic, okay? A very powerful spell that I'm very skeptical of. I don't believe anything I see on TV, and that is why I didn't believe that either. That's not to say that there's not going to be another attempt. And it might, my 2004 predictions, I think it was, which most of them did not come true, I will admit, but the assassination attempt where it looks like Trump is actually dead, that's what I predicted, and yet he isn't. Now, that never happened because he got shot, and it was an assassination attempt, but he didn't look like he was going to die because he stood up and said, fight, fight, fight. And now he's got perfumes and colognes and everything else. And I think that was like the spell, was when he stood up and said, fight, fight, fight. He whispered it. He didn't even say it, even though the mic was hot and he could have. He said, I don't know, man. It got me. I did not believe it. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys, because that's why I'm here. I'm here to tell the truth as I found it and as I see it. I'm a truth seeker, and so I do get things wrong. But in this case, I just don't trust Trump, and I haven't. Especially since he said he was going to lock up Hillary Clinton. He never did. I was going to vote for him the first time in my life in 2016, and I didn't. And then in the end, he didn't do anything, and I know there are excuses for Trump, but...
Oh. Oh, wait.
Listen, I'm glad Kamala isn't president either, but it doesn't either one. It's a uniparty. We need to realize that our system has been captured. Both sides have been captured, and who knows how long. I would say at least JFK, but personally, because of what I know about the Federal Reserve, thanks to the Creature from Jekyll Island book by Edward Griffin, I personally lost my train of thought. Oh boy. All right. We do have to stay vigilant. God help us all, for sure. I am Make America Great Again. I just don't think Trump is the one that's going to do it. I think we, the people have to do it. We have to be the change we want to see in the world. So before I start getting all crazy preachy, I'll leave the rest of this down below. He does talk about the trade deal somewhere in here. I should have marked it better, but I have to go. I love you guys very much. Thank you for hanging out. Stay safe, and I hope to see you soon. My next video is going to be all about Michigan and Goshen and, you know, a lot going on here and how the stuff that's going on in Michigan echoes what's going on in the whole United States. So, take care, guys. Thanks again. Peace out.